Salutations, I'm glad you could make it to another episode of The Little Things. I know some of you might be new around here, so just to catch you up, The Little Things is a series I do twice a year, where I rattle off my favorites of the past 6 months in the fields of YouTube and podcasts, TV and film, music, gaming, reading, cartoons and animation, and travel and culture. I do this every January and July because those are the times I find it enriching to be grateful for a few things, especially right about now when we've been through disappointment after disaster, after catastrophe. So I hope you find something worth using as an escape in this roundup. Without further ado. Most of you probably know James Rolfe as the angry video game nerd, but to tell you the truth, I've always been far more taken in by his Cinemassacre videos. Where the nerd was a character Rolfe played, Cinemassacre felt like you were being taken in by his authentic self, a cinephile with a penchant for characteristically low-budget horror and action movies. With all the charismatic authority of a learned store clerk, the sort of cozy stream of consciousness of these videos has always been my cup of autumnal hot apple cider, especially during Rolfe's seasonal Halloween Monster Madness videos, themed this year particularly in tribute to the late Roger Corman. In honor of one of spectacle horror's defining auteurs, Rolfe reviews and reflects on a marathon of works he was involved with, and he's just as in his element as you would imagine doing so, giving me some movie recommendations to last me an infinite number of oncoming Halloweens, and shedding a necessary light on Corman's fascinating career. Cinemassacre isn't just a great source of recommendations of lesser-known films, but the format they were presented in, as Rolfe reflects very significantly on the importance and pageantry of marathons hosted by the likes of AMC and TNT, an energy James similarly retains in these videos with ease. I hope his archives of movies like these inspire creatives to make their own strange sci-fi pieces, similar to the works of YouTube page Grouse House. In the mythical land of Australia, where performing art is valued and bizarrely funded by the government, we have some of the paramount minds of sketch comedy, and I've been long fond of Auntie Donna and Hug the Sun, brought about by collaborators in that orbit, but my favorite endeavor on the channel has been this year's Descent, a serialized miniseries about 3 scatterbrained submariners seeking a portentous eel city. And among the charmingly DIY sets, costumes, and props, and the wall-to-wall memorable performances, I was most impressed by how well shot Descent is for something relatively tongue-in-cheek in tone. There was clearly a lot of thought put into where the camera sits and how light hits a shot. Descent will challenge what you believe can be done on a YouTube budget, shoulder to shoulder with how many phrases are fun to repeat in an Australian accent.
Does everybody like my pipe?
Did you just take that out of the fucking wall?
Sydney Heller and Olivia De Laurentiis are the brains behind a lot of my favorite online skits, since I discovered them from the Poloni Show Halloween special on Hulu, giving them a spotlight. I had to see more of their creativity at play, culminating in a new favorite podcast of mine, the frantically funny Sid and Olivia Talk Shit. Most podcasts need a really specific hook to reel me in, if not a host I'm already attached to the work of, and I can best describe Sid and Olivia's show as what you expect any given podcast to be, but broken. And I don't mean that in a bad way, I just mean...
Want to be like an executive producer of this show? Get on the Patreon.
And if you want to be an executive producer of my titties, get the $50 tier.
It makes you like pull on your dick to like injure your dick and then it like grows thicker.
Okay.
This is basically 2 really funny people peppering topics you swear you'd never care about, like reality TV and matchmaking, with vocal stims beyond reason. And it's a highlight of my casual commutes just for being that. Robert Eggers is one of the modern kings of the horror genre, weaving influences from German expressionism with modern paranoias and sensibilities effortlessly. And while I'd still call The Lighthouse my favorite work of his, Nosferatu certainly wasn't one to be outdone, in which Lily Rose Depp gets the Nepo Baby redemption stamp of approval, Nick Holt continues to make poor decisions around vampires, and Bill Skarsgård makes a terrifying Orlok. I think the marketing for this movie did a terrific job keeping him largely shrouded, so the payoff when I actually saw the movie was well worth it. A villain whose sort of omnipresence is just as foreboding as when he's deep within your walls, right under your nose. As someone who always respected the cinematic canon of Nosferatu and its impact, but just found the older German version's execution to lack a certain punch, Eggers slots into that modern vacancy as the de facto king of today's Gothic-styled scary movies with this effort excellently. As haunting as this creature representing a heinous past is, little changes when we accelerate to a future scourged by xenomorphs. The key to enjoying Alien Romulus is to not give much stock to its legacy-sequel aspects, but rather to pretend it's an alien theme park attraction, which I swear I mean as a compliment. It really did feel like Alvarez was given a playground and some eager young actors and was asked to imagine, hey, what would be fucked up to involve a xenomorph in? And he absolutely delivers in that regard. And the practical bugs and excellent lighting and aesthetics really shine at this point. Though I also have to wonder if I'd be less generous without the excellent Kaylee Spaney as the movie's lead. But the setting and dressing of Alien's world really helps unconventional heroes thrive. And watching a diminutive Spaney handle cool-looking equipment that dwarfs her, let alone fending off monsters like xenomorphs, felt like a twinge of what I feel like audiences may have experienced when Sigourney taught them you don't need roided out muscles to look cool on camera years ago. Because when this feels more like a distant alien side saga, it really sings. And my misguided optimism likes to believe that's where Alvarez's head was at, and it's where my head wants to meet this movie halfway. Legacy sequels are hard, whether passed to a new hand or trusted to a prior, as Tim Burton triumphed over in equal measure with his own release. A lot of people levied the criticism at Beetlejuice that it's alright, but a messy narrative that feels uneven and to some unfulfilled, to which I posit, I thought that's kinda what we liked about the first movie, is that it was messy and offbeat, just like this one is. With those very same "we're so back" allegations on Tim Burton's shoulders, I thought Beetlejuice turned out rather good. Maxed out with thoughtful touches, I was surprised to see thrive, with a lot of effort where many would quit while they're ahead, cutting to whole sequences that play with the delivery systems of these characters' stories in ways I really loved. Important plot points that easily could have been talked through are told with claymation, spaghetti horror lampoon, and some infectious needle drops that feel at home with the sensibilities of the 80s classic. In fact, it maybe outdoes the original in its kinda gruesome imagery. Nothing shocking per se, it delivers light body horror and spooky concepts, and it doesn't pull its punches the way a 2024 Beetlejuice absolutely could have in different hands. If it's true Jenna Ortega is Tim Burton's new muse that inspires his new work, I believed it here, but the returning cast also feels like they haven't missed a beat, especially Michael Keaton and Catherine O'Hara, retaining comedic timing and delivery that effectively revived this IP from the other side. Though Burton isn't the only horror auteur that made a movie about his complex feelings about having a daughter. If you hear police sirens right now, I have to reveal, this video is a trap. The sooner you realize that there's no way you'd be laughing this much if M. Night Shyamalan wasn't in on the joke, you'll have a ton of fun with Trap. That's not to say this one gets by strictly on silly points, as the brilliant premise of the film is hoisted into truly memorable territory by Josh Hartnett in the lead, playing a villain protagonist who's equal parts Norman Bates, Homelander, Bugs Bunny and Bandit Healer, with charm and unnerving tumult in equal measure. With him at the center, Trap plays out like a video game, ingratiating you to its rules in a way that nudges you to make guesses and leaves you little choice besides wondering how you'd strategize this level if the Dreamcast controller were in your hands. These parameters are delivered by truly funny characters and situations, which I don't say in that lame-o, it's so bad it's funny way. It's authentically a movie that escalates comedic premises with a thriller's elements. You might assume I'm just dick riding a long-proven filmmaker, but maybe I just fell into his trap. The Penguin could have easily been a crummy knockoff of The Sopranos with a DC character slapped onto it, but it turned out to be a really excellent knockoff of The Sopranos with a DC character slapped onto it, thanks largely to its exceptional cast. Colin Farrell's memorable take on Oswald from The Batman is hoisted by the lovably vulnerable Rainey Feliz as Victor, Deirdre O'Connell as every gangster's nightmare, a guilt-wielding mother, and most monumentally, the seriously standout Kristen Milioti, stealing the show as Sophia, a relatively second-string character in Batman canon, boosted into one of the best villains to set foot into Arkham in this particular iteration. If you're concerned this will either be too grounded for its comic roots on one hand, or too littered with comic book name drops to be taken seriously on the other, there's yeah, maybe sometimes to both. But what always brought me back was how distinctly and engagingly human the characters come off. Even at their absolute most despicable, their dynamics and conflicts were legible and enrapturing, and the characters were pretty easy to root for. But maybe that's just my love for seeing a fellow Italian winning. Which brings me to Megalopolis. Megalopolis is a triumph. Not that it's of artistic quality that needs to be preserved, or that it truly proved any of its doubters or critics wrong. Rather that something so driven by confidence in an experienced filmmaker could be put together with duct tape and toothpicks, and in seeing Megalopolis in a theater was a religious experience. Lines were flipped on camera, and I loved it. Adam Driver has time control powers, and I loved it. Aubrey Plaza is WoW Platinum. I loved it. Are critics wrong for slamming Megalopolis? I don't know, but I can say for certain I'm gonna miss days like these as the industry veers away from truly demented blank checks like this movie was made with. So I try to recommend 2 musicians I haven't before at this part of these videos, but honestly my most honest highlights this quarter came from familiar places. Sabrina Carpenter dropped maybe my favorite music video of the decade with Taste, and on top of that, we received from her A Nonsense Christmas, the kind of appointment performance I used to love having around the holidays, guided by Sabrina's charm and humor. Sabrina's persona I can only describe as a beautiful woman who behaves roughly as bewitching and violent as Bugs Bunny's idea of a beautiful woman. And she's been just a delight to follow in her rise to fame, and I think she's well earned her powerful reputation on the airwaves this year. On a similar note, as if Dua Lipa needed to re-establish herself as my favorite pop star, I was fully wowed by her Royal Albert Hall concert, broadcast through a CBS special entitled An Evening with Dua Lipa. Her every masterstroke as a performer is only bolstered more by having a live orchestra at her side. And I can't think of anyone that can hopscotch between really playful dance pop and James Bond-worthy crooning the way Dua can. There will always be room for you on my Spotify Wrapped, my love. Though the real cream of the music crop was seeing Lawrence live in concert at Denver's Fillmore Auditorium. I long described myself as not a concert guy, but I knew I'd regret it if I missed Clyde and Gracie in my own town, and they made believers of the experience out of me. Even if crowded places like those historically make me anxious, the live electricity of my favorite indie band made any of those reservations fade away. This is largely a personal note, but it's pretty rare I've been able to sit through an entire concert without my sensory issues putting me into an anxious episode, but jamming to some of my favorite music with other fans in an atmosphere as safe and fun as Lawrence created felt downright euphoric, and I feel like my fear of rowdy concerts has been conquered, and the music world kind of feels like my oyster for the first time, and I'll always owe that to Lawrence for helping me out of my shell that way. Any videos I'm showing you that I took on my phone won't do it justice. You just can't pass up the chance to dance your heart out and enjoy Lawrence's theatricality live. I heard word enough that Sonic Generations was one of the more solid Sonic games that I was primed to pick up the recent remaster, but I'm obviously bearing the lead here that the real headliner is the newly added side campaign devoted to Shadow. Like most people who spend too much time online, my relationship with Shadow as a character has long been up and down, but it turns out all you really had to do to nudge me into fully loving Shadow was putting him in a game that's unabashedly really good. Shadow Generations takes all the speedy trademarks of Sonic, but flourishes it with Shadow's personality and abilities. After for many games feeling like playing Shadow was just playing Sonic, but a little floaty, Shadow can take full advantage of teleporting, stopping time, and releasing a slew of fun Doom powers that can help give the Hedgehog his most earnest time to shine. It's cohesively satisfying to see Shadow's limelight in this new game come full circle with his movie debut, carving himself a spot as a titan of the box office as well of gaming, just like the Avengers, which is my sweaty segue to Marvel Rivals. Marvel Hero Shooter sounds like a recipe for disaster, but Marvel Rivals is actually pretty freaking cool, and if you've gazed at any of its reimaginings of iconic Marvel heroes for really any sum of time, you would know that, but it really is worth giving a hands-on try. Accessible and fun and heavily studded with detail, the way some characters share specific dialogue if they're paired up in the waiting room or fighting one another, to an even bigger extreme, the way they can combine their powers for truly bonkers synergy moves. The meta of Rivals, often described as balanced, by sheer virtue of every character being absolutely busted, and only countering each other by being busted right back. Whether it's Punisher and Rocket Raccoon enhancing each other's weaponry, or Venom literally sharing his symbiote with Spider-Man if they're on the same side of the map. But above anything else, after years of corporate synergy with the MCU, leaving gaming endeavors like Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite and Square Enix's Avengers stifled and starved of flair and identity, it's refreshing to say that that is something this game has no problem with. Daring to throw deep cuts like Magic, Jeff the Land Shark, and Penny Parker, alongside really fun reimaginings of A-list Marvel favorites, the addicting free-to-play time killer you've been looking for is right here, and it's marvelous. And shoulder to shoulder with the Hyper Bright Arcade shooter is the Hyper Bright Arcade Racer. Following the development of Victory Heat Rally for a few years now, it was cathartic to see its release with a fast-paced Mode 7 style charm that feels the most like F-Zero out of any recent racing game I've revved my engine for. There's only so many ways I can describe a really fun driver game, but I'd say Victory Heat Rally deserves flowers in equal measure for its memorable character designs and absolutely insane music. The only thing I'd say I like more than the sound of this game's soundtrack is the sound of one of my best friend's voices, which is in Fantasia Neo Dimension.
You should see me in my workshop. No better item maker out there. They tried, but some items are made for hiding other items.
Clever.
If you're a listener of West Coast Toast and Roast, you may find Ez here somewhat familiar. That's Will, who I could not be more proud of. And of course, I was going to delve into her big video game VO role, and I found a keenly detailed Square role-playing game in that endeavor. The environments are all based on real-life handcrafted dioramas, which brings an impeccable toyetic vibe that helps this game sit pretty alongside the heyday of PS1 RPGs. These retro moods are balanced beautifully with a modern sense of quality of life, that makes the combat and adventuring of Fantasian a delight. One I heartily recommend if you're involved with the Octopath Travelers and Atlas RPGs of the world. This is absolutely a deserving peer. Rakshasa is a game from 1988 that's largely a platform shooter in a similar vein to Mega Man or Contra, but with the brilliant twist I'm shocked no one has tried to copy, wherein your shaman character can die over and over, but reviving to carry on comes at the cost of playing an increasingly demanding minigame as a ghost. Pin Golf is a game released 3 years after Nintendo's classic Golf that more or less revolutionizes golf physics on an 8-bit hardware in a way that goes undersung, complete with the creative touch that you're playing as a robot who will explode if you overload your swing strength, forcing you to temper and tying your strokes with a lot of precision and efficiency. Mortal is a bizarre platformer where after dying, your corpse is left behind on the stage, which you can use to your advantage to the extent that you can weaponize your own past tense bodies and pile them up for ease of travel and problem solving. A truly strange artifact of morbid gaming concepts before the time of the ESRB. Everything I just described, I kind of lied about. These weren't actual games of the 80s, rather, they're mini-games packaged into UFO 50, one of this year's Paramount indie games, which is more or less a marathon of small-scale 8-bit games tied into the meta-narrative of a fake game developer called UFO Soft. The UFO 50 being their catalog of their fictional career, making games in the golden age of the 8-bit generation. As creative and addicting as these games are right off the bat, there's a really admirable extra layer to the chronological order the games are presented in, and the sort of continuity they form. Starting off obtuse and hard to play, as ideas and concepts are sharpened by the developers within their made-up history as 80s video game makers. What this game captures above all else is the magic of the NES and its contemporaries, which were the first to broach a lot of genres on very scant resources. And by forcing themselves into those parameters of the past, the developers of UFO 50 made a handful of veritable masterpieces. Even if not every single one sticks with you, personally, the sheer number of hours I've lost to Devolition, Overbold, and Campanella 3 alone were well worth the price of admission. If UFO 50 is a parade of video game icons that feel eternal, you can find a similar ensemble that is eternal in Astrobot. But in our culture of Craven cameo hodgepodges, rest assured, in between rescuing your favorite PlayStation characters, you will play through some of the absolute finest platforming you will have the privilege of pressing buttons through, all in any environment you can fathom. Jungles, skyscapes, deep seas, you name it. And Astrobot will take you there, and no two platforming biomes will feel alike, while they comfortably harken back to a familiar, satisfying game feel. Everything down to the physics of the tiny items flooding every room, and gyro physics as you pilot your PS5 spaceship, were designed with utmost possible fun in mind, combining the collectible aspects of 3D Mario with the hidden paths of a Crash Bandicoot and the myriad abilities of a Banjo-Kazooie to make an absolute best of all worlds without feeling derivative or repackaged. Thousands of equally rapturous fans can't be wrong about this one, leaving little doubt in my mind that Astrobot and the creatives behind it are the heir apparent to console gaming moving forward, to the point that you can imagine how overjoyed I was to see Astrobot sweep the Game Awards, including Game of the Year. If this makes the ripples in the games industry I think it could, I'd say the best is yet to come. If you're as disappointed as me that the stellar Team Fortress 2 short expiration date was never picked up for its intended purpose as a series pilot, you may find that burn soothed as I have by the Team Fortress 2 comics, which, after a long 5-year waiting period, posted their 7th and ostensibly final issue this winter. I was not disappointed to find a lot of the same zany wit in these comics that I loved in those animations that define the Team Fortress mercs and helped cement them as icons for me. It feels frankly throughout like I'm watching something funnier than most cartoons I've recently observed. If you want something off the wall in that vein, these comics go down really easy, and you'd think you'd need a feather touch to expand on these characters without feeling forced. But the team behind these comics hit the mark perfectly. On a more personal note, as much as I love the likes of Scout and Heavy, I don't like being heavy. I've been overweight most of my life, and anyone with similar experience can tell you it's a challenge. Losing weight, curbing cravings, facing judgment for the way you look, it's no piece of cake, no pun intended. Anyway, I really recommend T-Shirt Swim Club by siblings Ian and Elisa Carmel. Ian is a comedian and Alyssa is a physician, and both have dealt with body weight related challenges and come out the other side okay. Ian's wit and Alyssa's clinical knowledge converges with their equal-hearted compassion for what's truly a touchy topic. They don't provide easy solutions, but they certainly made me feel less alone as someone who experiences a lot of stress over a desire to lose weight, something I know a lot of people can relate to. And whether that's you or not, I think T-Shirt Swim Club is a truly exquisite read about life as a fat person and all the small, scary moments that are more common than you'd think. And sometimes I find the best way to fight a personal demon is to identify just how many of us are united against it. When I used to teach 4th grade, I read my students The Wild Robot by Peter Brown, and I thought to myself, golly, this book would make a great animated film. And here we are. The Wild Robot is DreamWorks' take on what if Bambi was disrupted by Johnny Five, and the result is surprisingly touching. It's a complicated, unconventional family story stirred up by those cry muscles perfected by DreamWorks in Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, and complemented by the very same film's design tendencies, blending textures and levels to give a lot of life to the animals of the forest Roz trudges about exploring. And as a longtime connoisseur of cold cinema, the snowstorm sequence in this movie is an all-timer. With each new release, it feels like DreamWorks' days of arched eyebrow celebrity proxies are further and further behind us, in favor of a more full-hearted, artistically fulfilling fare, and I couldn't be happier. For similarly robust aesthetics, I'd also recommend An Almost Christmas Story. If you miss animated Christmas specials from the heyday of ABC Family and Rankin Bass, this'll scratch that itch and do so while seriously upping the ante. A richly detailed short film that gives a handmade expression, with the budget doing a lot of legwork to lend a technological eye to really plus up your idea of what a holiday classic can look like. I heartily suggest watching this, but it's also January as I post this, so find some way to put a pin in it for December if watching Christmas outside of Christmas bums you out like it does me. It makes a great primer for a full Christmas feature pre-show. I personally watched it before going out to see Red One, which I also found cute. Just loosen up. We're having fun. Creature Commandos starts off a little rough in my opinion as the episodic runtime struggles to balance the ensemble cast James Gunn seems otherwise really suited to in a movie format, and his inclinations of humor and pop culture references feel less earned because of how expedited that runtime is. But it was around episode 4 that the setup is all put behind the cast by and large, and the actual game is afoot, starting with the shockingly heartbreaking backstory of the Weasel, maybe the last DC character I ever expected to make me cry, and it was all uphill from there. Once the characters feel settled in their motives, I was able to settle into the show much more comfortably. It's true the Commandos are the ragtag found family you've seen from James Gunn many times. The freedom that comes with an animated medium, however, allows for his morbid ideas to take center stage in a way they couldn't before, living up to the macabre and human theming put to this spookier squad. Among undead creatures and mutants, all Creature Commandos miss are aliens and yokai, which was fulfilled in turn by watching Dandadan. I've heard this show described as regular show in Japan, where increasingly bananas shit happens to two once normal characters, and Yeah, pretty much, and the transforming shonen flavor added to the mix results in one of the most refreshingly bold anime I've recently watched, especially in an era where adapting manga runs higher and higher risk of sort of passionless, boring boarding from manga to anime. Dandadan is directed with a lot of loving touches that befit its zany tone beautifully. On a similar token, it's really cathartic to see an arc of Kinnikuman directed with a modern sensibility and budget this year. The perfect origin arc was a neat battle royale pitting the series' offbeat villains against each other in a brutal gauntlet, while the heroes start off by taking a backseat largely, and giving the Devil Freaks corner of Kinnikuman's world of wrestlers a time to shine is something I've always wanted. The statuesque characters are animated with the chisel and details that makes it all the more impressive when they're applied to zany OkCupid profiles like Dalmatian Man, and even more so when you see them move with a lot of personal style. Whether your favorite is the talking mountain, the talking cassette player, or the shape of water over here, everyone gets solid time to shine. It does my heart good to see Kinnikuman make sort of a comeback so long after its heyday, especially considering if that character never made it big, we'd probably never have shonen like Dragon Ball. It's hard to make any argument to watch Dragon Ball Daima without acknowledging that above all else, it is the last work handled in any way by Dragon Ball's original creator, Akira Toriyama, before his death earlier in 2024. And I love the sort of lower stakes premise of Daima allowing something to happen to Goku and friends that's somewhere between gods and distant universes, and how it sheds the spotlight on characters long neglected and fills in blanks we've been waiting for. But no matter what, watching it at my local barcade, crowded on the same day the satisfying Dragon Ball Sparking Zero game came out, as everyone came together in Toriyama's honor to celebrate new iterations of the timeless universe, that's just some of the most fun I've had watching something ever. Daima is imaginative and exciting and scratches the itch of eras of Dragon Ball long missing. But above all else, it brought people together in a way only Dragon Ball can, and I have to give it mad props for that alone. The Denver Art Museum opened an exhibit called Wild Things this year in tribute to accomplished artist Maurice Sendak, who you definitely know, even if you think you don't, as the creator of Where the Wild Things Are. If the endearing and sometimes uneasy art of that book spoke to you as it did me when I was a kid, his wider gallery was shown here and was something absolutely to behold, as the full historical context of his life behind his every masterstroke as an artist opened up possibilities to me I didn't realize such a wide breadth of art had covered. Another year brought another trip to California, and I was happy to revisit a personal favorite destination of mine, the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures. This fall focused on new exhibits around color and motion, Technicolor, and cyberpunk, a tribute to the factor of color in sci-fi concepts in film, something easily taken for granted, and how the earliest chromatic effects and objects of the medium rippled down forever into what we watch today. I always love the Academy Museum as a time capsule and tribute to all kinds of movies, and this historic investigation was just as enriching as I had hoped. But above all else, my favorite thing of 2024 was you. Something I'll tell you empathetically if you're listening to this audio and have therefore reached the end of this video. Thanks so much, and I hope you'll stay tuned for what I've got next. Happy New Year, and I wish you an exceptional 2025.